Ohio State beat Penn State yesterday 20-12. The Once Upon a Saturday tour was in the shoe. It is the first time in 5 weeks that we have not seen a game come down to pretty much literally the last play. Now, while it was still a one-possession game, it was not, the nail-biter that we've become accustomed to. And that's on me. You think you're just going to take Danny Cannell on the road with you and things are going to continue to flow smoothly, and that's just never the case. When has that ever been the case for us? It's never been the case. Nonetheless, a fun time was had by all. Producer Jesse, notwithstanding, he's pure Eeyore vibes today. He's down pretty bad. But it's okay. Penn State still got everything left to play for. The word alarming was the word he used to describe Penn State's performance here. But we talk about the winners first. And there have been some really wild takes flying about this game. So, you know how I say all the time that phrase, just because something hasn't been doesn't mean it won't be. This kind of game is the reason I say that a lot. A Ryan Day team. What is that? What's a Ryan Day team? You've heard it in the past. A Ryan Day team can't do this, or a Ryan Day team wouldn't be able to do that. Well, Ryan Day can't get it done. That's what I heard after the Michigan losses or the Georgia loss last year. That can't. Instead of hasn't. And I don't really like to use that word in the definitive because you never know what the finished product of a program or a coach is because you never have a finished product. They're humans. Ryan Day's no different. They're always evolving, and the good ones are improving while they're evolving. What I saw yesterday was the result of an entire organization looking in the mirror after last season and just being brutally honest with themselves and getting really intentional about forming themselves into the kind of product that you saw yesterday. And that's the kind of product that can, for the second time this year, fail to top 20 points and win a big game. This time at home, the Notre Dame game was on the road. They've been intentional about evolving. What I saw yesterday was sort of the byproduct of a program led by a head coach in Ryan Day that got really brutally intentional after last year about never being the second most physical team on the field in a big game again. And this isn't the last one they're going to play like that this year. I know what's down the road. But yesterday, they faced an extremely physical opponent. There was a path for Penn State to win this game. And the path was Penn State to come in there and do what maybe they've seen Michigan do. And that is sort of try and bully Ohio State, try and put them on skates a little bit, get Ohio State in the alley, in other words. And the thing about it is they did. They got Ohio State in the alley. Ohio State just pulled out a bigger baseball bat because it's a different caliber team, because it's a differently wired program, I feel like, right now than it has been. Jim Knowles has a lot to do with that. Probably adjusting strength and conditioning and really just adjusting mentality has a lot to do with that. Padlock stats all over the place, man. When you hold your opponent to 1 of 16 on third down and 1 of 3 on fourth down, when they're 2 of 19 on third down and fourth down combined, that's insane. Marvin Harrison might as well own property in State College. He owns everything else there. 21 catches, 347, and 1 touchdown over the last 2 games against them. And yesterday, man, you don't have Ibuka. Everybody knows where it's going on certain plays, or at least you think you do, and it goes there anyway, and there's not much you can do about it. That's not necessarily, breakdowns on the part of Penn State. Maybe you view it otherwise. I just think it's a phenomenal football player. Penn State, I'll talk about them in a second. I got a lot of thoughts on them. Ohio State ran 44 plays in Penn State territory. Penn State ran 15 in Ohio State territory. I would say that's pretty much a padlock stat, but it's fun. It's fun because you hear people tell you what you have to do. And just a few years ago, like within the last decade, the pendulum had swung radically. And it became you have to be able to score 40 or 45 a game to win a national championship. And Ohio State and Ryan Day had those kind of teams. And they don't have that kind of team this year. They got the kind of team that, at least as of right now, before they maybe get some guys back from injury, can do what they did yesterday. And they can just win a slugfest. Okay, well, does that mean they can't do something? Bama's the same way. Does that mean they can't do something? Georgia may be the same way. They ain't got Brock Bowers right now. You know how serious I am because I said they ain't got him instead of just they don't have him. Is that the case? Or maybe we just have a different style of college football on our hands this year? Or maybe did the pendulum start swinging back? Maybe was that offensive revolution not so permanent as it was presented to us? Who knows? Who knows? Now let me talk about Penn State for a second, because I got a feeling, sneaking suspicion, when we talk about Ohio State a lot over the next 2 months. So there's one phrase, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. I'm sure some of you have very well participated in it. And it's okay if you have, I just happen to disagree. The phrase, or not a phrase, the idea that James Franklin is overrated is floating around a lot right now. James Franklin's overrated. I heard it 1,000,001 times yesterday. And here's the evidence they give you. He's 1-9 versus Ohio State. He's 3-6 versus Michigan. He's 3-16 against AP top 10 teams. This is where the bumper sticker logic will get you. Because you say he's overrated, and this is your evidence. And I ask you, who out there is touting James Franklin as being better than Urban Meyer or Ryan Day? I don't ever hear anyone say that. So you're not going to present his record against Ohio State to me as evidence that he's overrated. I don't hear folks telling me James Franklin is superior to Jim Harbaugh right now. So you're not going to tout Harbaugh's record against Franklin as evidence he's overrated. And then you get to the other stat, because you figure if you don't have me on the first two, surely you got me on the 3-16 versus AP top 10 teams. You know what I did today? I had producer Jesse go through McGrady, who is stats and info for us, and find how many of those 19 games Penn State was a point spread favorite in. Because that's when you're overrated. When they're favoring you to win and you're not winning, that's when you're overrated. They were favored in one of those 19 games, and they won the one game they were favored in. James Franklin, please hear me, is not overrated. James Franklin is the most accurately rated coach in America right now. It is so crystal clear where he falls in the pecking order. He's not Ryan Day. Penn State's not Ohio State. He is not Harbaugh. Penn State is not Michigan. And it is not top 5 caliber, but it's a little bit beneath that. And James Franklin, likewise, is where that's where we peg him as a head coach. Like, that's exactly where he fits. How's he overrated? He's only overrated if you continually rating him, if you continue to rate him above coaches he doesn't beat. We don't do that. He's only overrated if you continue to favor him against teams that are beating him. That doesn't happen. He wins the ones he's supposed to win. Largely, he loses the ones he's quote-unquote supposed to lose. Now, if I'm a Penn State fan, I'm listening to that and saying, this doesn't work for me, brother. This doesn't work because we should be better than that. That's the conversation you should have. Not whether he's overrated. Franklin's not overrated. He's accurately rated. Do you deserve more? Should you expect more? Now, that's a fair question, and that's a valid conversation to have. How wide is the gap? You know my feelings on it. If I put Marvin Harrison over there in white and blue yesterday, it may very well be a different outcome. If I just switch one or two plays without Marvin Harrison over there on the visitor sideline, it may be a different outcome. Not a huge gap, not an insurmountable gap at all, but there is one, and it's still there. And maybe they've closed it, inch by inch. It's still there. But the whole overrated thing, I don't have much time for it because it's not true. It's not true at all. Now, Ryan Day, on the other hand, I've heard a fair amount of you call Ryan Day overrated as well. And Ryan Day was never overrated in my book, but you're starting to see something now. You're starting to see Ryan Day do what other great coaches do, and that is evolve. And that is, as they're a young head coach, then you get 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, all of a sudden you start to add layers onto your game. You start to add wisdom-based layers onto the evolutionary identity of your program. And all of a sudden, they can win games now in a manner they could not win them in a few years ago. They got intentional about making those changes after last year. You got a guy on the West Coast in Lincoln Riley who can't do it for the life of him. And you got a guy in Columbus, Ohio who can hire the right way. You think he would have settled for what Alex Grinch is providing USC out on the West Coast right now? They didn't. They didn't at Ohio State. They got intentional about getting better. They got intentional about being elite on both sides of the ball. They're not fascinated with one side and then say, oh, screw it, do whatever you want to do on the other side. That's how you have happened to you what continues to happen to Southern Cal when they play Utah. And so you look at Ohio State, and all of a sudden, they'll be okay. They'll be better years offensively for Ohio State, but I don't think they're going to lose the idea of the blueprint and the formula and the identity that they have now formed defensively. That right there is going to be here to stay. And if they don't have it in a given year, they won't settle anymore until they find it again. That's how you know you got a legit coach on your hands.